Welcome to the Midlife Midsters podcast, your podcast for inspiration on being bold and saying yes to making the most of midlife. We're so glad you joined us for this podcast episode on volunteerism. This is Carmen.
This is Michelle.
And I'm Marianne.
And today we're talking with Christy Cole. Christy Cole is a neighbor, friend, and a person in our community who's had a long career in philanthropy, working with a spectrum of nonprofit organizations from higher education to direct social services to foundation work. Christy and I met through board service, and we're really excited to have her here today. You're a very talented person that can do lots of things. How did you end up in the nonprofit world and working in philanthropy?
My professional life, taking on a role of an analyst. I'm a writer and a communicator, a relationship builder. This was really, really hard. I had to become an Excel person and a numbers person.
None of us like Excel.
But what it did was it gave me this sort of technical, this underpinning of financial knowledge and the knowledge specifically of how these charitable vehicles worked. I understood, endowments, how the spending policy works, how the investment of endowments worked with charitable trusts and a lot of different organizations that had these types of assets. And pretty quickly, I thought, oh, gosh, I really would love to work for one of these nonprofits. And I was offered a job doing fundraising for the American Association of University Women. They were a client of mine. Oh, yeah. And the woman who hired me said, you can do this. And I said, but I've never asked anyone for a gift before. I've never done this. And she said, well, if you believe you can do it, then you can do it. And she was right. And so I was a couple of years there at AUW, and then realized that the really great jobs for learning in the world of philanthropy I wanted to have a big shop experience, and so I went to work for the Naval Academy, which was a really unique and special place to be. At the Naval Academy, there's a focus on the moral, mental, and physical development of midshipmen. And I found that was a period in my life where I really developed a lot of integrity between my values and the way that I was living my life and working in my profession. So that work there was really foundational to the rest of the work that I would do in philanthropy with other nonprofit organizations, either in service to boards like at Doorways, in consulting with a wide range of local nonprofits. And then I really found my current professional home while I was consulting and serving in various volunteer capacities. So I was really excited to have an opportunity to work with the Community Foundation in Arlington. I had an opportunity there. I had been consulting there, and I realized that from that seat, I could be in service to many nonprofit organizations in the community, more than I could possibly serve as an independent consultant. And I could work with people from all across the community and all across the region to help them have the right tools to realize their charitable goals, whether that's giving or whether it's volunteering or bringing that congruence and consistency between their values and how they're involved in the community. So that's a long answer to your question.
It's a great answer. Can I ask one follow-up question, because I think it relates to what we're going to talk about today, which is sort of finding your volunteer path in midlife. Can you say more about what was that values alignment that happened to you when you were at the Naval Academy? That sounds really interesting to me. What changed for you?
It was clear to me that everyone there had made a decision to lead and to serve. And I was particularly admiring of young people who are 18 years old who are making the decision to, put this their value in service to country and in service to their values right up front. I mean, a lot of young people are there just, at that stage of life, they want to have fun. And so I was really inspired by that, and then inspired by the donors that I was working with who had, really fascinating and impactful careers, both in the military and in the work that they did outside of the military, in business and in community leadership. And so it really, and particularly in working with plan giving donors, those who were, often, 65 plus, I was seeing what it looks like when someone has lived out their values. And there's and this is a sort of a sidebar, but there's a great column by David Brooks on eulogy values.
It's a great column.
Yeah, the column from it's from probably 10 years ago now. But
About
their
resume
values and eulogy values. And what I was seeing was that there were people who, and they weren't necessarily living out, living out eulogy values their whole lives, but they came to this understanding that it was not just the work that they were doing for their own professional, success or for accolades or to get to the next level that mattered. It was the work that they were doing in community with other people and in helping others realize their potential, and in doing that, realizing their own. And so, I had a unique window into people who had a lot of young people and then people much older than me who were living out their values. And so, that caused me to really see the path forward for myself.
Christy, listening to you when you were talking about growing up in Baltimore and looking for something in grants and gifts and giving and being part of a community, it sounds like you had that mindset of purpose at a very young age. Yeah, you've grown into it, but it seems like it's pretty innate and it's always been there. Do you feel the same way?
I mean, look, for a period of time, I wanted to be a famous singer. I thought
we had those moments.
When LA Law was on, I thought that I definitely was going to be an attorney. But you're
lucky enough to have that community purpose.
I did, and I think it was just a lot of great examples in my life. Particularly my parents. My dad and his professional life, and my mom as a teacher of over 35 years.
So one of the things we find with midlife women is this desire to find more purpose and to be able to live more passionately. So tell me a little bit about, what do you notice about midlife and volunteering? I think sometimes people have a hard time figuring out how to get started, or they worry about what they're going to get themselves into if they start volunteering.
Yes. And so I think it's really important to be able to say yes to new opportunities to volunteer and get involved, but also to be able to say no, and to know, what really sparks your passion. And it doesn't mean that you can try something and not like it. You don't have to continue to collect volunteer roles, and you can switch gears and move on and try something else. And, in midlife, I think there really is this tug between sort of stagnation and generativity, and there is a bit of a reckoning as if you're someone in midlife with children, and as those children are moving on in their lives and kind of thinking about, well, what's next? And sometimes, I do think women tend to think that a lot of preparation is required to take that next step in getting involved in the community. And, what we bring to our work in the community as people in midlife is a lot of wisdom, the wisdom to know, what we don't know, to know that, we can always be learning. We can, and it's not, I talk to a lot of women who think they have to take a class before they join a nonprofit board or before they go to volunteer. And, they want to do the learning and the preparation. And whereas a lot of men, they think, well, my gosh, they'd be so lucky to have me, right? Of course. But everybody brings their own unique superpowers to a volunteer experience. And so you might have someone who, it may be tied to a particular, avocation that someone has. We know a woman, you know her too, Carmen, who loves to bake. And she would bake birthday cakes for the kids in the family home at Doorways. I know someone who has beautiful handwriting, who would always write handwritten thank you notes to donors. People who love working with kids, who want to take on those opportunities to tutor and mentor young people in the community. It's really pretty endless, the opportunities to try new things on for size and then, move on if it's not a point of passion for you.
Some great takeaways there. You can say no after you've said yes if it's not quite the right fit. And I love your point about, I think, like you said, a lot of times women assume they have to prepare and they have to be studious in getting ready to volunteer. They should just trust their own wisdom and their own experience.
That's right.
And do you find some of these volunteers, do they bond in their own way and collaborate and bring a lot to the table with a different perspective as maybe those individuals that work or at staff at certain charities?
I think the volunteers bring a really important perspective as community members. And what's most helpful is when volunteers come in with a growth mindset and, because they're often working with populations that they don't know a lot about, or where they don't have the same lived experience. And so I think having that, open mind is really, really important. I think that the staff at most community-based nonprofits really, really values volunteers, but particularly when the volunteer can adapt to what's needed in the moment. And sometimes it's not just, showing up to, read to a kid, paint the fence. Sometimes part of really being engaged in the community and engaged with the nonprofit is learning and understanding the challenges that organization faces and trying to help make, whether it's connections to other people, other organizations, whether it's, being willing to advocate with your local government. So I think, when we think about volunteering, the best thing is to really have an open mind to all of the different ways that you can be engaged and to know that it doesn't have to look like, this one, you're not necessarily going to be like the candy striper at the
right
at the hotel, at the hospital, So I think that's, and now I will say for those who serve regularly in the same, same volunteer slot each week, or they're serving on a board that meets on a regular basis, it's a great opportunity to make connections with people who you ordinarily would not be connected with. People in different, that's what I've loved about board service, that I work with professionals who are, in all kinds of different fields and have expertise in other areas that I don't encounter in my day-to-day. And so it can be really fun to be on those kinds of teams.
I really agree with that because I was on that board for 6 years. And the other thing, it's very different from work and it's very different from your social life. And I ended up with probably 4 or 5 board colleagues, maybe more, from that I still see for lunch or coffee regularly. And we have helped each other professionally. We network with each other. We also help each other in the community. The other thing I'll say is every time there's a local election, we all call each other and say, who do we want to vote for? And I always call Christy because she's always having to deal with the county board on one thing or another. So she always knows the latest and greatest. But that has been really valuable to me because some of them I never would have encountered them in the day-to-day. And that it's been a really nice addition to my life. It makes me feel more part of the town that I live in. And especially when we live in the Washington, D.C. area, which is a big city and everybody's from somewhere else, it definitely makes it feel more like my small hometown.
Smaller.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, which has been nice.
I find, like in my work life over the years and different establishments that you would work in, there is a culture there. But when you go into a place where you volunteer and there's staff and so forth, the energy there is very different than going into a business that does not have that. I mean, for people to give up their time, they're not getting paid. People respect that. But the energy and the collaboration and just to do better in the community, coming together selflessly like that, it's a lot of energy. It's really positive.
It is. And you really deepen your understanding of a lot of issues and have the ability to see, beyond just, your individual experience or your family's experience in the community. And there are many people who live where we live whose jobs have been focused either across the river in D.C. and many even internationally focused, and who've been in and out of Arlington over the course of their careers as they've, lived overseas. And so, we don't all have the same kind of, when I lived in Baltimore, we all had a similar baseline understanding of the place.
Yep.
And it's really exciting to see that coming together for people, even people who have, raised children in Arlington and been in the community for 20 years. They've been, kind of one foot in and one foot out. And it's neat to see them kind of jump in with both feet.
Christy, with the Arlington Foundation, the Community Foundation, for other women that are looking for volunteerism and community, whether they live in Texas, Washington State, is there something very similar to Arlington Community Foundation?
Community foundations, gosh, there's probably, say, over 750 community foundations across the country, probably even more than that. And they are generally organized by geography. I mean, and there are similarities among, most of the community foundations. They really exist to connect community needs with resources and to help sort of have that bird's eye view of what the biggest and most difficult challenges are, and, to try to convene donors and the business community and the nonprofit community to address those things. And so, there are community foundation resources all over the country. There are also, in our community and in other communities, there are often organizations that kind of aggregate volunteer opportunities. In Arlington, we have Volunteer Arlington, and that's a great resource. It's kind of, if a lot of communities have, leadership, name of the place.
Right.
And so those organizations can also be really good sources. And, we also have, there are a lot of, here in the D.C. metro area, there's an organization called Compass. And Carmen, I know you want to say a bit about Compass, because I think that's a good opportunity for people who want to do skills-based.
Yeah, so I would say, from what I know about Compass, that's a particularly good opportunity for not just women, but women and men who've had professional careers and have a particular skill that they'd like to bring into a nonprofit organization. And what they do is, so nonprofits will come up with a project that needs to be accomplished, and Compass goes out and finds expert volunteers to work on a project. And they're often, not always, but I'd say they're often infrastructure based. So things like finance or operations, HR, technology. And they get this group of professionals together, they form a team, and they solve a problem. The application process for the nonprofit organization is quite rigorous. So I think of that one as for people who've had long professional careers and haven't had time to volunteer, and they know a very particular functional area or a kind of business thing really well. That's a really good opportunity for folks. And I think they do that. I know they do them in Washington and Chicago, but they may have other places in the country. I think they've tried
I just
to
know of
expand it.
those two, but I wouldn't be surprised. It's a great program.
It sounds like there's a lot of different models that take play here for volunteerism. You're talking about Compass. We talked about Doorways. I know in Arlington, there's an organization. There's several: Dominion Guild, Northern Virginia Alliance League. And women, if a woman can't find that, it's something they can definitely start. And basically, it's women coming together monthly, looking at the smaller charities. They will do a campaign like a holiday lunch or something like that and raise money and actually just hand it to that nonprofit. Maybe it'll buy them a bus. Maybe it will expand on some other needs. But that's also a model that I find really inspiring to see that.
Collective impact is something that is really very popular among women. Because and believe it or not, there's the Lilly School of Philanthropy at Indiana University, and they have a whole group there that studies women in philanthropy. There's a Women in Philanthropy Institute. And so we actually know a whole lot about women's giving patterns, and they do generally tend to really come together around a social or communal experience. There's a lot of energy around collective impact where women come together and make a decision about something that they're going to fund, and everybody makes some contribution into that, and there are opportunities for that in our community for sure. You named a couple of them with the Dominion Guild and the Women's Civic Alliance and Northern Virginia Alliance. I mean, there are, and there's even one called Lemonade, where it's a very low barrier where people can come and bring a check for $40 or $50, and everybody votes on the nonprofit to support at the next meeting, and the nonprofits have an opportunity to come and talk about what they do. So those are really great ways to get exposure and learn about the nonprofit ecosystem and kind of what some of the needs are. Where I think we get a little bit tripped up is that when women are in these groups, they often feel a little stymied to lead the way forward. And there are women who have both the capacity and the vision to do more, but maybe lacking some of the confidence to do that. And so, what I hope we can do is create a space where, as women, we can support each other in realizing our own goals for philanthropy or for civic engagement and leadership. And, maybe for one woman, that's a decision to run for public office, right? And that's a big, audacious step to take. For someone else, it might be, funding a new, sexual assault prevention program, because they actually have the resources and can do that. And I think being able to celebrate that kind of leadership is really important for us as women. And it's a little hard because we do kind of have an orientation to wanting things to be, wanting things to be equal and wanting everyone to feel comfortable. Right. And so it can be sort of scary to step out and say, no, I see this need and I'm going to do something really significant to address it. I'm going to run for office. I'm going to fund this program. I'm going to build a coalition or start a new foundation to do X, Y, and Z. I mean, it's part of I see my role in the community is being able to kind of work with individual women to nurture those, big ideas and goals along, and then to begin to build a community of women who support each other in doing things like that.
Marian, I think you and I mean, we've talked a lot about that because both of us have done board service and board president service, and both of us in our respective ways had a number of insecurities about what we were doing. I mean, Christy was kind of my rock for the doorways thing, because I was thinking to myself when the CEO resigned and then COVID hit like a month later, I was like, I could really mess this up, And it took me like 6 weeks. I was really kind of panicked. I was like, oh my gosh, what am I can't quit. I can't step away. And I got to figure this out.
And there are lifelines out there.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the thing. No, you're not alone in this. And I think it's sort of the courage to both lead the way forward and to be vulnerable and rely on other people, which, in collaboration. And that's what, I think as women, that's something we do pretty well.
Support and collaborate. I think we own it there. And it does make for an easier road.
Oh, it does.
Absolutely.
What other questions do we have for Christy Cole?
She's covered a lot. I admire what you do.
Oh, me too.
And I know I've known you for a few years, but you're willing to have coffee with someone, have a phone call with somebody, help them navigate a situation that they might have, and empower them, just like you were saying, that they have what it takes.
Yeah, Marianne called me
with
a board question, and I was like, I know who you need to talk to.
Well, I love being able to be a resource, and I love being a connector, and I love learning from other people. So there isn't any one of these interactions that I have with someone in the community where I'm not learning something myself. So,
do you have any special advice for somebody that might want to get into volunteerism? You talked a little bit about it already. Someone with no experience, somebody moving to a different area wants to get involved somehow on a local level, what they could do.
I'd think about, your 3 core motivational values, and what really lights you up. And it's funny, my husband actually is a great example. He told me, he leaned over to me one time when we were at a fundraising event, and he said, every time they say the word mother, I feel like just something inside of me and know that I have to do something. And, and it's because of the role that his mother played in his upbringing in his life, and how, she worked so hard for their family. And so he is really drawn to helping mothers. And so you have to listen to that voice that's kind of deep within you. He's like, I'm tearing up every time they say that word. And so listen in your head, what is lighting you up? What can you just not stop thinking about that you'd like to get involved in and make better? For me, there's a word that I probably overuse, but it's opportunity. And I am really lit up by the notion of creating opportunities for people who are struggling to overcome adversity, for people who are looking to start their next chapter. And so that is something that really fuels a passion for me. And, I think that's and it could be, that you seek out an opportunity based on a life experience that you had. I mean, my grandmother was a victim of domestic violence, and that had a long reverberating effect in our family. And it's what initially connected me to getting involved with Doorways. And so, listen to those voices in your head about your life experiences, the things that just really inspire you and move you. And I think that's
what a great
start.
answer.
I also think it's important to note, some people want to do things in the arts and with the environment and other stuff that we haven't really talked about. And I think that's another one that can be fun for people.
I'm so glad you brought that up, because here's the thing. In the work that I do, particularly when I'm working with donors who are putting together legacy plans, and these are, plans that really reflect, the change they'd like to see in the world and how they'd like to be remembered. And I'm often struck by the combinations of interests that people have. And so it's, the people who are interested in free speech and public television, who are also interested in animal welfare, animal rights. And, it's, and there are often, there are links in, between these different interests. And so there's just, and the arts in particular are a real source of inspiration for many people. And it's that way of connecting and reflecting on their lives and on society and on what, I met with someone last week who talked with me about how here we live in DC, and the most important thing that we can do in the arts is to connect all of our children to real art. Because we have the Kennedy Center and the National Gallery and all of these opportunities, and to, enliven their minds and their experiences with that kind of exposure. And she's like, it impacts the way that we think and the way that we analyze and the way that we feel. It's just, and so I just love seeing people who have all of these different passions, and, and how that passion, in the arts might also be linked to, art therapy for kids, or it might be linked to, art education, or just to bringing the most fabulous exhibits that we could experience here.
Thank you, Christy.
Well, thank
you. Do
you
you have anything else that we haven't asked you that you'd love to talk about?
Well, I just want to thank you for creating the space to have this conversation, because I think it's a really exciting part of midlife. And as women, we don't lead. I mean, our lives are not as necessarily, perfectly linear, often not linear at all. But there's a certain commonality to this experience at this age, and an opportunity to reflect and think about, what the next chapter is really going to look like for us.
And we can write that script, which is so nice.
Yep.
And I think what's resonating for me is that advice to listen to that inner voice. It's going to give you a lot of cues to what you might want to invest in terms of volunteering.
That's right.
Thank you, Christy.
Thank you for being here.
We're so glad you joined us. We hope you found this a safe and inspirational place to help you make life the best that it can be. You can find us at AmericanMidsters.com. That's AmericanMidsters.com. Please let us know any future topics you're interested in. Thanks again for joining us today.